talking about maybe some bright sides in the Middle East right now. We have now the agreement with Iran, which is a success for diplomacy. Most people in the world would agree to. And it will also lead eventually to Iran coming in from the cold in world economy. And most countries are welcoming that, but we have a few exceptions, the Saudis and Netanyahu's government.
And the Republicans in the
And the
Senate.
Republicans. So could anything stop this process, the next US elections?
Yeah, who wants to gaze into the crystal ball of American elections and say what will happen? I think it would be very difficult to row back now. And I think that is one reason why there was such a big American diplomatic effort to get the agreement done. And I mean, Secretary of State Kerry committed himself personally enormously to it. And the successive high representatives of the EU, Cathy Ashton and then Federica Mogherini, also had. And this was an area of cooperation with Russia which was kept going even while everything else in West Russia relations was deteriorating. So I think that there is, kind of an enormous commitment into this, which will sustain it. But I do think that of the three sources of resistance to it that you mentioned, I do think that the Saudi source is the one about which I, would have the greatest concerns, the most kind of pressing questions that I wanted to ask.
And you're thinking about Yemen and Syria.
Yes. Well, Saudi Arabia has moved to a very different policy in the last couple of years. I think if you look at Saudi armed forces 25 years ago, you could say, that, well, these are just vanity projects, buying all of these weapons and this modern air force and so on. You wouldn't say that now. Not now it's being used. Right. They're building a northern security barrier of extraordinary dimensions on the border with Iraq. They've got a southern security barrier of less impressive dimensions, but nonetheless for real on the border with Yemen. They've been deploying armed force around the region, their area. They've become more and more assertive. At the same time, there is a large Shia minority in Saudi Arabia, whose main area where they live happens to be the oil-richest area of Saudi Arabia as well. So the Saudi government has always been very sensitive about that community and what it might get up to, and so on. So they've gone from a quite cautious status quo view of the region, one in which they were willing to make an awful lot of compromises in order that kind of, business could be done and things could move forward in a relatively calm way, to being a government that at the moment seems willing to take quite extraordinary risks. And I guess that that's the question mark.
Yes.
That you then wonder about the relation with Iran. But I do think that even there, they must see that there is less than little to be gained by really pressing in an active, hard military way against Iran. And there is a big difference between making declaratory statements of undying opposition and actually really going out and doing something about it with force. And I just pray and hope that the Saudi rulers will recognize that difference and not cross the line.